Hello and welcome to Gefet and the Daf. I'm Yael Shimoni, bringing to you together with Hadran and Yeshivat Drisha, learning Iyun and your cute Daf Yomi. And we are after Hanukkah. Zot Chanukah is just over. This Friday is the first Friday, the first day after Hanukkah. And we want to continue the light of Hanukkah into the entirety of the year. And we will be learning something that is connected to Hanukkah because, as we all know, Hanukkah is about the Menorah of Bet Mikdash, which is a symbol of wisdom, of the light of Torah, of the wisdom of Torah. As we know, Harotze le'achkim yadrim, one who wants to be wise should go to the south where the menorah is. And today we're going to be learning a small iyun about the wisdom of the Sanhedrin. And Be'ezrat Hashem, learning about the wisdom of the Sanhedrin, the wisdom of the Torah, we can connect and continue the lights of Hanukkah into the darkness of the winter ahead of us. Be'ezrat Hashem. So we're in Daf Yudzayin Amud Aleph and Amud Bet. Sugya talks about who are the people who are able and who are supposed to be in the Sanhedrin. And Rabbi Yochanan says something rather surprising, that you don't only have to be wise, you also need to have other traits in order to be in the Sanhedrin. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, en moshivim b'Sanhedrin ela ba'alei koma, ובעלי חוכמה, ובעלי מראה, ובעלי זקנה, ובעלי כשפים, ויודעים ב70 לשון, שלא תהיה סנהדרין שומעת מפי המתורגמן. So we see Rabbi Yochanan has a long list. Only one of the traits that he lists here is to have wisdom. Ba'alei chokhmah, it's the second trait. But he adds all kinds of other things that are needed for Chachmei Sanhedrin. We won't dwell upon all these things and to understand why we need them, because we want to focus about what kind of wisdom that the Chachamim of the Sanhedrin need. And to understand that, we have to continue the sugya to what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rab. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rab, אין מושבים בסנהדרין אלא מי שיודע לטהר את השרץ מן התורה. So Rav says something which is rather surprising. A sheretz, the 8 shratzim, are animals. For example, you have a turtle there and you have a mouse there, that they're tahor when they're alive, but when they die, they're metameh, betumat maga. If they die inside of a vessel, so then they make that vessel tameh. It's a special tumah for shratzim. Other animals that die don't have tumat shratzim, they have tumat nevela, which has other rules. But shratzim have this specific tumah. And Rav says that in order to be in the Sanhedrin, you have to be able to be metaher the sheretz. Metaher the sheretz means that the Torah said that these 8 animals are tameh. But a chacham of the Sanhedrin has to be able to prove from the Torah itself that it's tahor. Very, very strange statement that Rav says. And then Rav continues and says, Amar Rav, ani adun v'tarenu. Here I'll give you an example how you can do that. How can you take a sheretz, one of these 8 animals, and say that they're tahor? And before we'll read what Rav says, it's just important to understand that these 8 animals are not dangerous to people. They're actually animals that have skin. I think that's one of the things that are connected to them. There are 8 specific animals that were listed in the Torah, and they're not harmful. They're harmless. And Rav you need to understand that point in order to see how Rav can prove from the Torah that the sheretz that is said in the Torah that is tabeh is actually tahor. ומה נחש שממית ומרבה טומאה טהור, שרץ שאינו ממית ומרבה טומאה, אינו דין שיהיה טהור? ולא היא מידי דהבה עקוץ בעלמא. Okay, so in order to understand what Rav did here, how did he metaher the sheretz, let's get some help from Rashi. Okay, so Rashi, we'll read him carefully, he says, מה נחש שממית, אדם ובהמה, ומרבה טומאת נבלות וטומאת מת בעולם. הרי הוא טהור כשהוא מת, שאינו בכלל שמונה שרצים. Rashi says, a snake kills. He kills man, and he kills animals, and a snake that kills so many different beings in the world creates 2 kinds of tumah. The snake has an ability to create tumat met when he kills a man, and he also has an ability to create tumat nevela when he kills a behemah. So a nachash is a creature that creates tuma in the world, a lot of tuma. So how does that help us? Let's go back to what Rav said. ומה נחש שממית ומרבה טומאה טהור? sheretz שאינו ממית ומרבה טומאה, אינו דין שיהיה טהור? Rav here does a kal v'chomer. He says, a snake is tahor. He's not one of the eight shretzim. But he creates a lot of tuma in the world. So obviously the snake has to be more tameh than anything else because he's harmful. And he creates a lot of death in the world, and he's the one who creates tuma in the world. And still, when the snake dies, he's not a sheretz, he's tahor. So kal v'chomer, the shretzim, which don't create tuma in the world because they're harmless, are supposed to be tahor. They're less of a tuma agent than a snake, and if a snake is tahor when he dies, so also the shretzim are tahor when they die. Continues Rashi and says, Velohi. He explains how the sugya ends. Velohi, lav kal v'chomer. דאין זה חומר. אם הוא ממית ומרבה טומאה, שהרי כמו כן יש קוצים שממיתים ומרבים טומאה והם טהורים. Rashi explains the end of the sugya. The end of the sugya answers Rav's kal v'chomer and says, Rav, this is not a good kal v'chomer because not only a snake can kill people and animals, also rocks and plants, kotzim, thorns kill people. The world is a world of death. And you don't have to be a living animal in order to create death in the world. Also, you can be a stone, you can be a rock, you can be a piece of wood, you can be a thorn. And of course, that thorns and woods and pieces of rock are tahor because they're part of the world. And still, they're agents of tuma. They create death in the world and they're tahor. So that proves that this kal v'chomer is irrelevant because the fact that somebody creates death in the world has nothing to do with tuma. So the whole kal v'chomer was built on the fact that the snake creates death in the world, and the sugya says the snake is no different than a thorn. So now, with Rashi, we deciphered the sugya, and we have a lot of questions left to ask. Why is a chacham of the Sanhedrin supposed to do such a strange thing? To go against the rules of Torah and to prove that the Torah is wrong? And why did Rav give this strange example, a kal v'chomer, which is actually irrelevant and doesn't do anything because it's a bad kal v'chomer? So this is a pretty strange sugya. Just to make the point even stronger, let's look at a different sugya, which is a makbilah to this sugya, a sister sugya in Eruvin. Eruvin daf Yud Gimel Amud Bes. If you look in Masoret HaShas or if you look in Rabbi Akiva here on the daf, he'll show you that this is another sugya that we should look at. And in this sugya, we also see the end of the sugya is mamash one-to-one, our same sugya. You can look at the end. There's one difference. Instead of Rav, we have Ravina. Amar Ravina, אני אדון ותארנו, מה נחש שממית ומרבה טומאה טהור, שרץ שאין ממית ומרבה טומאה לא כל שכן, ולא היא מעשה כותבי עלמא כאביד. ממש the same sugya, almost the same wording, only differences between Rav and Ravina. But here, if we look at the sugya in Eruvin, it stresses the question that we had, that this chokhmah that Ravina is trying to do and that Rav is trying to do doesn't sound like such a good chokhmah. Let's go to the beginning of Eruvin. At the beginning of Eruvin says that the one who was most chacham and could do these things was Rabbi Meir. But even though Rabbi Meir was so wise, halacha was never pasking according to him. Let's see what the sugya says. Amar Rabbi Yacha bar Chanina, גלוי וידוע לפני מי שאמר והעולם שאין בדורו של רבי מאיר כמותו. ומפני מה לא קבעו הלכה כמותו? שלא יכלו חבריו לעמוד על סוף דעתו. שהוא אומר על טמא טהור, הוא מראה לו פנים. על טהור טמא, הוא מראה לו פנים. תנא, לא רבי מאיר שמו, אלא רבי נהוראי שמו. ולמה נקרא שמו רבי מאיר? שהוא מאיר עיני חכמים בהלכה. So the beginning of the sugya says that Rabbi Meir was one of the greatest rabbanim of all. And everybody knows that, including God. But still, halacha wasn't asking according to him because he could say, and what is tameh, he would say it was tahor, and what is tahor, he would say it was tameh. And the sugya continues and says, maybe he wasn't passing halacha, but he would be enlightening the eyes of chachamim in halacha. He could not actually say the halacha, but he helped other chachamim say the right halacha. Continues Rabbi Abahu, אמר רבי אבאו, אמר רבי יוחנן, תלמיד היה לו לרבי מאיר וסומכוס שמו, שאומר על כל דבר ודבר של טומאה 48 טעמי טומאה, ועל כל דבר ודבר של טהרה 48 טעמי טהרה. So Sumchus, a student of Rabbi Meir, also could give many טעמים of tum'ah and tahara, and continues the sugya and says, Tana, תלמיד ותיק היה ביבנה, שהיה מטהר את השרץ ב-150 טעמים. A great Talmud was in Yavne that he could take the sheretz and make a Torah in 150 kinds of te'amim. And then Ravina says, and I'll do the same, and that's the Kal V'chomer of Rav. So when we read this sugya in Eruvin, and we look at the sugya here in Sanhedrin, there's a very big question that arises. Is this chokhmah, which is described here, the ability to be metaher the sheretz, such a good chokhmah? What does it give us? Maybe it just confuses us. Maybe it just creates somebody who can't be pasking halacha. Why does Rav think that that is the kind of chokhmah that the Sanhedrin has to have? So let's just sum up some of the questions that we can ask on the sugya. I'll put up 3 questions. Okay, what is the difference between Rav and Ravina? You see, in Masechet Sanhedrin, the one who did the Kal V'chomer was Rav. In Masechet Eruvin, the Rav who did the Kal V'chomer was Ravina. Is that important? I didn't find an answer to this question, and we'll just leave it there. B'ezrat Hashem, if you find, I'll continue looking, and if I have something, I'll share with you. Another question. Doesn't matter if it's Rav or Ravina. Why are they giving a Kal V'chomer which is not good? When the sugya ends by saying the Kal V'chomer is bad. So why offer this Kal V'chomer in the first place? We'll touch upon a bit of an answer to this question, but you can keep that question in mind. And the last question will be the question that we'll really get into. Why is it important that the elders of the Sanhedrin would be capable of rendering a sheretz pure? Why should they be metaher the sheretz? So we'll see from the sugya and Eruvin, this is a kind of wisdom that actually makes somebody problematic halachically. So why is it so important when we are sitting in the Sanhedrin? And this will be our main question in the Gefet. So now, after we saw these 2 sugyot, we read Rashi, let's meet a famous and important question that Rabbeinu Tam asks on the sugya. So we're back in Sanhedrin Zayin, where in Dibur Matchil שיודע לטהר, and Rabbeinu Tam asks, מחשה לרבנו תם, תמה לנו בחריפות של הבל, לטהר שרץ שהתורה תימתו. So Rabbeinu Tam here asks a simple question. He says, I don't understand. If this is what's written in the sugya, it makes no sense. It's harifut shel hevel. It's wisdom of nothingness. Why should we be needing this? This doesn't make sense. And Rabbeinu Tam continues, and we'll continue reading the Tosafot, and he gives a very interesting answer to his own question. מפרש רבנו תם שיודע לטהר מטומאת נבלות שלא יטמא במסע בחז"ל. Rabbeinu Tam says, you read the sugya wrong. Not only you, Rashi read the sugya wrong. It doesn't say here in the sugya that Rav tried to be metaher the sheretz, that he tried to make the sheretz pure, that he won't be tameh at all. That cannot be. That would be nonsense. What does the sugya mean? That even though a sheretz is tameh, he's not tameh in all the kinds of tumot. There are different kinds of tumot. We won't get too deep into this because you need to learn more about tumah v'tahara. But let me just give you a bit of a background. There's a tumah of met which is metame be'ohel. If you are in the same house with a dead person, you're tameh. You don't have to touch him. You don't have to move him. You're tameh just being underneath the same roof with him. That's a very special tumah. Tumat sheretz is tumat maga. If you touch the sheretz, then you're tameh. If you're holding him, if you touch him. But there's another tumat nevela, which means that even if you don't touch it, but you carry it, if you carry a big enough part of a nevela, even though you're not touching it, you're also tameh. That's tumat nevelot, bemasa bekazait. You have to carry it, and it has to be at least kazait. So Rabbeinu Tam says, one of these 8 animals, the shmona shratzim, for example, a mouse or a turtle, when they die, they're tameh if you touch them. But if you carry them, even if they'll have a kazait, you'll be tahor. They're tameh and tumat shratzim, but they're tahor and tumat nevelot. And that's what's written here in the sugya. That Hachacham and the Sanhedrin should be able to show you that even though a sheretz is tameh betumat shratzim, he is tahor betumat nevelot. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, this chokhmah of the Sanhedrin is just to know well dinei tumah v'tara. It's not a special chokhmah that has to do with I don't know, understanding people or being pesking anything. It's just to know halacha very well, to know dinei tumah v'tara as you should. You have to be a real Talmid Chacham to understand tumah v'tara well. And why does Rabbeinu Tam give this answer? Because he says, if what's written in the sugya is that you are proving that the sheretz, which is written in the Torah, to be tameh, you're proving that it's pure from your kal v'chomer, that's nonsense. Why would that be something that a person that said every should be able to say? So this shita of Rabbeinu Tam is not only here, it's also in Eruvin, the same thing, the same question. The same answer, ואומר רבנו תם דלעניין טומאת בבלות איירי, שלא יטמא ממנו בחזית. We won't go into all the different points here in the Tosafot because you need to understand more Tumah v'Torah here, but just remember this basic fact. The Rabbeinu Tam really read the sugya different from all the other rishonim, including Rashi that we just saw, because he thinks that's what's written here in the sugya is that a chacham and a Sanhedrin has to know dinei Tumah v'Torah very well. In the Tosafot himself, if you continue reading him in Eruvin and here in Sanhedrin, you'll see that a lot of chachamim in the Tosafot went against Rabbeinu Tam. They ask questions on Rabbeinu Tam. The questions that we find in the Tosafot are questions regarding Tumah v'Tahara. And other chachamim, for example, in Masechet Eruvin says, I don't understand Rabbeinu Tam's limud. There's something problematic in his limud in Dinei Tumah v'Tahara. Again, we will not go into these questions of other Tosafot on Rabbeinu Tam because that's Tumah v'Tahara, and we'll need a different shiur for that. What I want to show you is that other rishonim had questions in other areas for Rabbeinu Tam. Forget about Tumah v'Tahara right now. The sugya itself doesn't work well with Rabbeinu Tam. We can see that question in Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz. Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz are also students of one of Baalei Tosafot. Rabbeinu Peretz is also a Baal Tosafot, but he has his own book. And he has another question to Rabbeinu Tam, and he says, ועוד קשה, לפירוש רבנו תם, דלטהר משמע מכל הטומאות. תלמיד רבנו פרץ says, I understand Rabbeinu Tam's question, but the pshat of the sugya doesn't sound to be right with his teretz. Sugya says, letaher et sheretz, to make the sheretz pure. It sounds like we're talking about making it totally pure, not partially pure, not only pure in dinei and nevelos, and maybe Tosafot is interesting, but it doesn't work well with the pshat of the sugya. So Talmid Rabbeinu Peretz, because of that problem, and I think also you and everybody thinks that the sugya, everybody except for Rabbeinu Tam, thinks that what's written here in the sugya is that a chacham and the Sanhedrin should be able really to go against what's written in the Torah, and of course that creates a question. Rabbeinu Tam's question is a good question, but we have to find a different answer. An answer along the lines to explain how, even if you're going against the Torah in your wisdom, why is that something that the Chacham of the Sanhedrin really needs to have, and why is that not a charifut Shalhevet? Why is this not a nonsense of a wisdom? Okay, so inside Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz himself, we have the first answer to this question from Rabbeinu Shimshon, again quoted by the students of Rabbeinu Peretz. So Rabbeinu Shimshon says, לכן נראה לרבנו שמשון, אני אדון ותערנו, אם לא היה כתוב בתורה שהוא טמא, אלא שטימאתו, אין טעם בדבר, אלא חוק גזירת מלך שטימאה את השרץ, ולבישת כלאיים ושענז. Says Rabbeinu Shimshon, when a Chacham of the Sanhedrin reaches a Sanhedrin, he should be able to understand that his logic would not help him reach the same conclusions that the Torah reached. That sometimes there is a contradiction between human logic and the Torah. Three examples, says Rabbeinu Shimshon, shatnez, kilaim, and sheretz. There are chukim in the Torah. There are things that don't make sense. A chacham in the Sanhedrin has to understand that not everything in the Torah makes sense. And continues to be the Rabbeinu Peretz and says, I can prove this from the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi in Sanhedrin, Perek Halacha Aleph, has also a sugya which is very, very similar with slightly different wording. There it says, Talmid Vatikalo le Rabbi Meir dehava mekata Torah de Sinai. Rabbi Meir had such a great student that he could take the Mount of Sinai and break it. פירוש, מתוך חריפות העושר קלין חמורים לטמא מה שתיארה התורה וכן להפך, והתורה שמטמאה חוק המלך וגזרה. So says to me the Rabbeinu Peretz, the Yerushalmi here says that indeed a Talmid can, a strong Talmid, will prove with his logic against the Torah. But what makes him a Talmid Chacham that is worth for the Sanhedrin is to understand that even though his logic makes him think X, he has to submit to the rules of the king, the Gzerat HaMelech, to the Chukim, and do Y, because that's what the Torah said. So that's the Shita of Rabbeinu Peretz, and what he says, this is not a nonsense idea. This is dafka, a very, very important point for a Chacham of the Sanhedrin. An elder of the Sanhedrin must bend himself to the decree of the Torah, even against his own intuition. Real wisdom is understanding the limits of the intellect. We do not understand anything. We don't understand everything. Many things are logical, but sometimes they're not. And a Chacham of the Sanhedrin has to be able to bend his head to the Chukim of God. So that's Rabbeinu Shimshon's answer to the reading of the Sugya. Indeed, everything that Rab says is really just logic, but the Torah is against it, and that's fine. And Chacham the Sanhedrin has to understand that. Now I want to look at a very, very different answer to the same question. As you see, I think it's a strong machloket, which is very interesting that in this question there will be a machloket. Let's look at the Meiri. The Meiri here in Daf Yud Zayin says, דרך הפלגה אמרו, אין משיבים בסנהדרין, אלא תלמיד חכם היודע לתאר את השרץ. First he says, this is not really what you need to be in a Sanhedrin. It's just a manner of speaking. But what does this manner of speaking mean? Says the Meiri, ויראה לי בפירוש דבר זה, שמראות הקלות יוצאות בדורותיהן מאיזה דין תורה, יצאו לחדש דינים, להוסיף ולגרוע להוראת שעה, וליתן סמך לדבריהם מן התורה. The Meiri says something very, very different than Rabbeinu Shimshon. He says, sometimes, or let's say it even stronger, in every generation, there might be a reality that causes the rules of the Torah themselves to create problems in the world, takalot, bad things. Din Torah might be good in its time and create a serious problem in a different time. The Chachamim of the Sanhedrin have to be able to realize there is a problem because of Din Torah, and then to be mechadesh dinim, lehosif v'ligura, to add and to take off, lehorat sha'ah, in their time. Chachamim of the Sanhedrin should have the ability to help the Torah work in different generations, and then they create short-term halachot that are meaningful only to their time in order to render the Torah to do right in their time of life. And, says the Meiri, they have to give a smach, the divrei from the Torah. They need to prove the differences they made in halacha from the Torah itself. This is a very, very, very different explanation of why a Chacham of the Sanhedrin needs to go against the Torah in his mind. In the Meiri, it's something that he has to use in order to help the Torah reach goodness in different generations. And continues the Meiri and says, ובדומה לזה כתבו הגאונים בדיני התלמוד, שיש ביד רבנים או גאונים לחדש גזרות ותקנות דרך כלל או דרך פרט, להסיר איזה עניין מכוער, לפי מה שיראה בזמנו, בסמך מועט. Says the Meiri, the גאונים themselves wrote the Chachamim have the ability to do gzerot and takanot to take away ugly things that happened in their time. And they can do it even with just a bit of a connection to the Torah, mostly their intellect and a bit of a thing from the Torah. That's a way to read the sugya that Rav said. Chacham the Sanhedrin has to have the ability to be metar the sheretz from the Torah. He should prove from the Torah itself when he changes the Torah. But continues the Meiri and says, על דבר כיוצא בזה כתבו גדולי המפרשים, לא נתן תלמוד אלא לבעלי הקבלה המומחית, או לבעלי הסברה הנכונה בשיקול הדעת הצלול לראות קוראים ומוסיפים ודורשים, אלא שפרגוד זה ננעל בפני רוב בני האדם. Says the Meiri, this wisdom, this ability to change halacha, to make it tailored to the generation, that is only for very, 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 very great Talmidei Chachamim that have to be very strong and also very intellectual and have svara nechona and shikul dat salul, and that is something that only very few people in a generation can do. Most people, they're behind a closed door, they cannot touch the Torah. This is only great, great chachamim in the Sanhedrin, and therefore, says the Meiri, it's only really the Gadolador that can do this. And that's also who sits in the Sanhedrin, not the ones who sit in our usual beit din of three. No, they don't need the special wisdom. This is a wisdom really for the top scholars of the generation, that they should have the ability to tailor halacha to the generation so it won't be takalot and dvarim mechoarim, no ugliness and no mishaps because of the Torah. That's only the great, 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 great people who are sitting in the Senate. So that's the answer that the Meiri gives. The elders of the Sanhedrin must be ready to invent, to meet the needs of the moment and address problems. Real wisdom is the ability to address problems in every generation. That's the Chokhmah of the Sanhedrin. So if we look at Rabbeinu Shimshon and the Meiri, it's mamash contradicting explanations to what this wisdom of the Chachamim has to be. According to Rabbeinu Shimshon, the Chacham the Sanhedrin has the ability to go against Torah, but he must understand he must continue working with the Torah even when it contradicts what he thinks. According to Meiri, the wisdom of the Chachmei of the Sanhedrin is to be able to help the Torah meet the generation that is, to use that innovation and to prove from the Torah itself against the Torah in a specific time when the need arises. So these are mamash different ways of looking at this Chokhmah of the Sanhedrin. I want to add a third direction, which starts with the Maharal, and I want to connect to the Maharal, the Maharsha, because the Maharal himself is a little hard to understand. The Maharal also, and the Maharal is much later to Rabbeinu Peretz and Rabbeinu Shimshon and the Meiri. He's in a later time. And he again quotes Rabbeinu Tam, quotes the question of Rabbeinu Tam, and says Rabbeinu Tam was wrong. Rabbeinu Tam, he said that there was a halach thing here. This is not halacha. Actually, we're talking about something that really does not work halachically. The sheretz is tameh. And still, Chacham the Sanhedrin should be able to make the sheretz pure, totally pure. And why is this not a chokhmah Shalhevet? So there's a length here in the Maharal. Those of you who want to read him in Hebrew are very, very welcome. I just want to sum him up in short. And says the Maharal that real wisdom is to understand the things truly. And here's what he says, שיש לדעת את הדברים במהותם בכל בחינותיהם, ואשר אצלו יש לו בחינות לטהרה בעצם מהותו, ככל הלימודים שלמד בזה שם. ומצידם יש לו בחינת מה לטהרה, אף כי התורה תימתו. Says the Maharal, real truth is actually very complex. It is true that Torah said that the sheretz is tameh, but the sheretz has sides of tahara in him. In order to understand that truth is really complex, he gives us a mashal, a metaphor. And he says, do you know the four different substances of the world that Aristotle says? The Maharal uses them a lot. fire, water, air, earth. Those of you who are interested in how do you call it, Avatar. So then they have these fire, air, water, and earth. So the Maral and also a lot of other rishonim and acharonim who took from Aristotle use these in a way of metaphoric ways and also in ways to understand all kinds of issues in the world. And here the Maral gives us a metaphor, and he says, if we look at a piece of wood, so what is it made of? Is it more earth or is it more air? And he says that's a machloket between people. Some people say it's air. Why do they say it's air? Because wood doesn't sink when you put it on water; it floats. So that proves that it's air. And other people say no. Wood is not air. Wood is dirt. It's earth. Why? Because when you burn it, you're left with pieces of earth in the end. So what is wood? Is it more air because it floats, or is it more earth because when you burn it, then you have this residue? Says the Maharal, the truth is it's one part of it is air, part of it is earth. It's hard to put the finger on it. A wise man will know that it has two sides to it. And the same thing goes to the sheretz, says the Maharal. The sheretz himself really has signs of tuma, has signs of tara. A wise man has to understand the complexity of the sheretz, that a sheretz is not all tameh, that a sheretz really does have in itself sides of tahara. And that is truth, says the Maharal. That is not heaven. That's really the way truth is. Now, the Maharal, as opposed to the Meiri and Rabbeinu Shimshon, that explain to us how does this help a Chacham of the Sanhedrin? Why is it important for him to know? How does it change his conduct? Right, Rabbeinu Shimshon said that he will understand that he has to sit down in front of Torah rules, and according to the Meiri, it will give the great people of the Sanhedrin the strength to tailor the Torah to fit each generation when the need arises. So we understood that. But the Maharal here remains very, very unclear to why is this so important for Chacham of the Sanhedrin. So I want to look at the Maharsha and offer that maybe the Maharsha will help us understand the Maharal. So the Maharsha has just a very, very short commentary on this, and he says one sentence. לטהר את השרץ, עניינו, שאין מושיבים בסנהדרין אלא שיוכל ללמד זכות לחייו. Says Maharsha, the people who sit in the Sanhedrin have to be able to look at somebody who is chayav and something. He's bad, he's evil, he did a sin, he's chayav, and they should look for a zchut for him. The taher, the sheretz, is a metaphor. It's a metaphor to being able to look at something that seems to be totally tameh and still find a way that is also tahor. What does the Maharsha mean? And why do I think it's a way of understanding the Maharal? So let me explain. The Maharal said that real truth means that things aren't what they seem. You can't just see one occurrence in something and then say that everything is the way you saw it, that contains the whole truth regarding the object that you're trying to understand. That is true also regarding people, also people who have sinned. According to the Maharsha, if you have a sinner, if you have somebody who's chayav, even chayav b'dinei nefashot, a man in the Sanhedrin has to see sides of goodness in him, to find him a zchut. And the only way that you can find a zchut to someone who's chayav is if you deeply understand what the Maharal said, that reality is indeed complex and things aren't always what they seem. And even if something happened and you can actually prove that something went in one direction, doesn't mean there is another option somewhere in the background, and maybe there's a higher understanding of the situation. So again, I'm offering the Maharsha as a way to understand the Maharal. Anyway, we look at it, what I'm sure of is the Maharsha has proof from the Yerusha. Let's look at the sugya that was already quoted in Talmidei Rabbeinu Shimshon, the sugya, our sugya in the Yerushalmi. So in our Gemara, this Gemara is in Perek Aleph. It's the end of Perek Aleph, as you all know. In the Yerushalmi, a very similar Gemara is not in Perek Aleph, it's in Perek Dalet. Perek Dalet talks about two different kinds of rulings. אחד דיני ממונות ואחד דיני נפשות בדרישה וחקירה. That's the Mishnah, Perek Aleph. You have דיני ממונות, you have דיני נפשות. They have similarities in the rules, but there are differences. What are the differences? דיני נפשות. דיני ממונות בשלושה, ודיני נפשות ב-23. דיני ממונות, you don't need a Sanhedrin. You can have just 3 people, basic. דיני נפשות, you need a Sanhedrin. 23 at least. דיני ממונות, פותחים בין לזכות בין לחובה. דיני נפשות, פותחים לזכות. Okay, so that is the Mishnah that will open Perek Dalet Bezrat Hashem. We'll be getting there pretty soon. And we see that in Dinei Nefashot, after when somebody is chayav, mita, and that's why he's being brought in front of the Chachamim, and that's why you need a Sanhedrin. The first opening of the discussion has to be to find a zchut, a favor to this chayav person. And here is the Gemara that is very, very similar to the Gemara that we've just learned. אמר רבי יוחנן, כל שאינו יודע לדון את השרץ ולטהרו ולטמאו 100 פעמים, אין יכול לפתוח בזכות. Rabbi Yochanan says, a person who has to be liftach b'zchut, how will you know? How will you know that that's the kind of person you need if he can prove that the sheretz is pure? So proving the sheretz is pure is really here a metaphor to taking somebody who's chayav and finding a zchut for him. And here we see the Gemara ends, אמר רבי תלמיד ותיק היה לו לרבי מאיר והיה מתאר את השרץ ומטמאו 100 פעמים. And here we have the קל וחומר, only here Rabbi ינאי says it, כיצד דנים את השרץ. אמר רבי ינאי, מה עם הנחה שמטהר טהור? עכבר שאינו ממית, אינו דין להיות טהור, או לחילוף, עכבר שאין ממית טמא, הנחה שממית אינו דין להיות טמא. So here we have another Gemara again, showing how we're looking at the snake who creates death, looking at the sheretz, עכבר, that doesn't create death, doing the קל וחומר, proving that the sheretz is tahor. But here we have the context of finding a zchut to somebody who's chayav mita. And that is the context of where you need a chacham of the Sanhedrin. So let's sum up what we saw. What is the chokhmah of the Sanhedrin? What's written here in the sugya? So Rabbeinu Tam, he is exceptional. He thinks that the sugya doesn't really mean that you take the sheretz and say that it's pure from the Torah. No, Rabbeinu Tam says that's nonsense. What we're talking about is the Chacham and Sanhedrin has to know Tumah v'Tara well, and he has to know Halacha well. That Halacha is sophisticated and it's hard. And if something is Tameh, it doesn't mean it's Tameh in every way, and there are different kinds of Tumah. And you can also say that as a metaphor to Halacha. If you want to be in a Sanhedrin, you have to be a great Tameh Chacham and know very well your stuff. That's Rabbeinu Tam. But we said all other rishonim and acharonim read the sugya in its pshat way, that this is really what's written here, that you should be making the sheretz pure. And we saw what seemed to be a machloket between Rabbeinu Shimshon and the Meiri. Why is this important? According to Rabbeinu Shimshon, it's important because the Chacham of the Sanhedrin has to understand that even if he has a logic, he has bottom line to obey the Torah rules, even if he doesn't understand their logic. And according to the Meiri, a Chacham of the Sanhedrin needs to be able to see that there's a problem in Torah in his day and age, that he will find ways to help Din Torah not do something ugly or problematic in the world, even if he says something that is against the Torah, but to prove that it's connected to the Torah. So that was Rabbeinu Shimshon and the Meiri. And then we saw Maharal talking about complexity in life, and I offered to understand the Maharal with the words of the Maharsha, that the Chacham of the Sanhedrin has to find a zchut for somebody who's chayav. In order to do that, to find a zchut to somebody who's very, very chayav, you have to understand the complexity of reality. And that's a metaphor to that when you're saying to make the sheretz pure. So again, I'm summing up an end of the Sanhedrin. The Chokhmah of the Sanhedrin is to bend himself to the decrees of the Torah, even against his own intuition. Real wisdom is understanding the limits of the intellect. That's Rabbeinu Shimshon. The elder of the Torah must be ready to be inventive and to address the moments and the problems of his day and age. Real wisdom is the ability to address problems in every generation. That's the Meiri. And we have the Maharal and the Maharsha, that the Torah includes many contradictory elements, and the world is complex, and a wise person is able to hold these contradictions because real wisdom is the ability to understand complexity. And what we understand is that a way to be finding a schut to the chaya, the way the Maharsha explained it, and Rabbeinu Tam, which says he didn't understand the sugya. The sugya is talking halacha. An elder of the Sanhedrin must have a command of difficult halachot. So today we really looked at 4 different ways of understanding what the chokhmah of the Sanhedrin is and what chokhmah of the Torah is. Is it knowing halachot? Is it knowing the complexity of life and being able to look at somebody who's chayav and to find a schut? Is it a way to understand that our intellect is just our intellect and God is much more than that? Or is it a way to help Torah find a way to do good things in every generation? And maybe all of the above. So I hope our learning is taking the light of the menorah, the wisdom that God gave man, the connection between us through the Torah to God. We were lighting the menorah. I hope that we will light our minds, be mehirot, our eyes in halacha, and to try to really dwell on the hope that Be'ezrat Hashem will be able to have the Sanhedrin back and to find this wisdom in our day and age. Be'ezrat Hashem. Take care. I hope you enjoy this learning of Sanhedrin, and we will meet again soon in the serious winter in Chodesh Tevet.